So before we can start moving around, we will have to change our parameters so they fit our new needs. And the parameters I'm talking about is the parameters inside our animator. So you can jump back into Unity and select your animator window and select your player so you're sure that you have selected the right animator. And in here we have some different parameters and we'll have to change some of them around. So basically we will need to switch some triggers for booleans and some booleans for triggers. And the easiest way to do this is actually just to delete everything except speed. Just right click on them and press delete, and it's going to complain about that you're deleting some connections or or it's complaining about that some of these triggers here or some of the parameters are used on some transitions. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So first of all, we will have to add a attack. So click on the plus and find a trigger and call this one attack. I know some of these we already have them, but it's easier for me to get an overview of what we need if I just delete all of them and just write them in again. And then click the plus, and we'll also have to add a bool called land, and then a new one called slide, and that should be a trigger, and one more trigger, and this trigger should be called jump. And then we need one more trigger called idle. So as you can see now, we don't have a jump attack anymore because we just outphased it, because we will only look at the jump variable instead. Or not the jump, the attack variable instead. So let's look at these different, what are they called, different transitions here, so that we'll have the correct transitions. First of all, this land attack here, we will not need it anymore. So you can simply just delete land attack, so that you only have idle from the get-go. And to go to idle, we'll have to trigger the idle trigger. Just right click on any state, make transition to idle, and here we click on the transition and we select the condition on the plus, and here we just select the idle trigger, and we'll also make sure that there is no exit time, there's no fixed duration, and there is of course no transition duration on it, so that it just switches right away as we usually want to. Beside that, we have the attack, and on the attack we need to make sure the condition is selected as the attack, which it is. On the transition back from attack to idle, we'll have to have an exit time, which is fine here. Then we'll have to select from run to attack. Over here we'll have to have a trigger called attack with no exit time, which is fine. Then from idle to run, make sure that you have the speed greater than 0.01, which is right. And from run back to idle, we have the speed less than 0.01. So as you can see here, we kept speed, so there shouldn't be any change here. Okay, then we click on slide, and it has selected the slide condition again. And from run to slide, it should be fine. And back from slide to run, we need an exit time, and we need a fixed duration and such, and everything is fine here, as you can see. So that's the ground layer. Let's try to figure out if everything is fine in the air layer. So click on layers and select the air layer, and in here we need to make sure that everything is set up properly as it should be. So let's see, from default state to take off, jump should be selected as condition, and here you can see it asks for jump attack, which doesn't exist anymore. So just click on the two lines here and click the little minus, because we don't need it anymore. From takeoff to jump attack, there is a condition that says that we should use jump attack. Actually click on that one and select attack instead. So we use the attack instead of the jump attack now, because jump attack doesn't exist. From jump attack to our landing, we need to make sure that we have a transition with a fixed duration, which we have. And from landing in jump attack, we need to make sure that attack is selected instead of jump attack here. And then everything should be fine here. From landing to default state, we have an exit time, or not an exit time, sorry, we have a condition called land set to false. And from default state to land, we have a land set to true. So everything here also looks perfectly fine now. So now the new part comes where we have to add something extra to the animations to make them more independent and make them actually do some or actually have them include some functionality in themselves or add some functionality to the game. So basically we'll need to make sure that for example, what we call it, the land function here, or the land animation, can make sure that the player jump trigger gets reset, make sure that the player set bool is false, that the set bool land is false, because when we click on the space button and we jump, it gets set to true, and we need to set it to false at some point when the player is on the ground. So to do this, we'll have to add a behavior to the landing, and we can do that by selecting the landing, click on add behavior, and here we'll have to make a land behavior. And then you click enter and click create and add. So we just created a script that is attached to the landing animation, and this script can check up on the animation, it can trigger some functionality on specific times, and so on. So if we find the landing behavior we have here in the asset folder, we can double click on it to open it up, and then you'll notice that there are some out-commented code here. And this code, for example, this onState enter, if you out-comment that, then this line of code, line 9, is going to be executed when you enter the animation state, which means if you need to change some things around when you enter a specific state, well, then you can write the code here. For example, if we had a game with a shield animation, well, then we could add some functionality here to the player, so when he pulls the shield animation, he will take less damage or something. But we don't need that in the slide, in the landing behavior. What we need to do is to make sure, as long as we are running the land behavior, we need to check if we are on the ground. And if we are on the ground in the landing behavior, then we need to reset the jump trigger so that we can jump again. And we need to set the landing bool to false, so we go from the landing animation down to the idle animation instead. So we need to check that inside the update state. So in here, the second function from the top, we have this line of code that says override public void onState update. So this onState update, this onState update is going to be called on every single update as long as the landing animation is playing. So when the player jumps and falls to the ground, he spreads his legs to land, and as long as he does that, this function is called, so we can keep checking if the player is landing on the ground or not. So here we'll have to have access to the player somehow. We could do that through the animator, because this animator I have here is actually the animator attached to the player. So we can go through the animator, get the game object, and get the player, and check if he's on the ground. But to make it easier for us in general, we can actually make the player into something called a singleton, so that we can access him everywhere in our scripts. So we can go to our player script here and go to the top of the script. And in here, we'll have to make a, let's just do it here in the top, a instance we can access. So we are going to write private player, and we are going to call it instance. And right now it's not static, and I'm going to show you why it's not static. I'm going to make it static later in a few seconds, so you can see why we make it static. And then we need to create a property for this so we can access it. Then this way we can either click it and click quick action and refactor it, or encapsulate field, or we can just click on it and press Ctrl-RE if you have Visual Studio. If you don't have Visual Studio and you can't do that, you can simply just write this code by yourself. Just going to move it up here so we have it together. And then we need to remove the set function. So if you don't have the hotkey for doing this, you can simply just write this code I have right here. Inside the get, we'll have to write if instance equals null. Then we have to say instance equals game object that find object of type player. And this will only work when we only have one player in our game. This means you can't use a singleton pattern for something that has more items, for example, our enemy, we won't be able to use this pattern for an enemy if there's more than one enemy in the game, because singleton is used for one item or one object at the time, so that we can access that one object at all times. So now we have our player singleton here. We check if it exists or we have accessed it before. If we haven't accessed it before, we access the player's game object and we find the player script and set the reference between the instance and the player script, so that we can use this instance here to access everything here that's inside the player script. So what I want to be able to do is to jump to the lamp behavior, and in here I want to be able to say player.instance, and I want to be able to player.instance like this, dot and my rigid body and so on, and access all these things on the player. But I'm not able to do that right now because it's not static. So to be able to write player and access something on the class level without having a specific object, we'll need to make it static. So if I go back to the player and write private static, and I write public static here, then the player's instance, the singleton instance, is static, which means I can access it by writing player dot. So if I go in here and write player dot instance, then we can access the instance dot, and then you'll see we can access everything that is public inside the player, which means all properties, the jump, the attack, and so on. So now we're able to access everything on the player. And what I want to do is to check if the player is on the ground. So I have to write, actually I have to make an if statement. It says if player dot instance dot on ground. So if the player is on the ground, we'll have to say animator. And the reason that I don't write my animator is because this animator here is already the player's animator, so I don't need to go through the singleton instance to access it. The set bool land false. And here it's very important that you write this exactly the same way as you did out here in your parameters. If you wrote it with a capital start letter, then you have to write it with a capital start letter here, and vice versa. Besides that, we will have to reset the jump trigger. So we have to say animator dot reset trigger jump, to make sure that the player can jump again. He jumps up in the air, and not until he has landed again we will be able to jump, so we can't air jump and everything. So when he hits on the ground, we can jump again. So now we have that functionality on the land behavior, which means when the player lands, he will be able to jump again. Yeah, let's try to see what we have if we run the game. We have the land behavior here. If we jump, we haven't added the functionality for jumping, so we'll have to do that. So sorry about that, we can't test it right now. But you could see when we start falling, the land here is enabled. You can see that it gets clicked on, and when we hit the ground, it gets ticked off again, as you can see here. We can try again. Land is ticked, and when he hits the ground, it's unticked. And the reason that it does like that, well, that's because the player falls from the sky, and that script we have from before, let's find it here. This script here checks if the player is on the ground. When he hits the ground, we set land to be false. And this will also mean if our jump trigger was ticked from the get-go, I think, like this, it will also reset the trigger. Yeah, okay, it does it right away when you start. Okay, let's just remove that jump trigger. Remember to remove the jump trigger if you did the same as me here. Okay, that was one of the behaviors. The next behavior we will have to make is our attack behavior, for example. So go to your layers, go to your ground layer, select your attack, and in there you will have to add a new behavior. So click on the attack, add behavior, write attack behavior, click enter, and create and add. If you double click on this and reload, if it asks you to, then you'll have to write some functionality in here. And we need to do two things. When we enter the state, we need to check if the player is on the ground, because if the player is on the ground, well, then we'll have to stop running. So we stop running when we are on the ground. Actually, I think I would like to, sorry if I'm jumping around, I just think it's easier to demonstrate if we go to our player script and go down to the handle input function. And inside the handle input function, we'll have to write some things so that we can actually move. So inside space, input get key code space, we say my animator dot set trigger jump. And again, remember to write the right parameters. Inside left shift, we say my animator dot set trigger attack. And inside this one, we say my animator dot set trigger slide. Okay, so try to save this, and if you go back into Unity now, we should be able to run, and we should be able to attack, run, and I can attack on the left shift. But as you can see, if I run and attack now, I'm able to skate over the ground like it's ice or something, and that's not the point. I don't want to be able to do like this. So now we have to make sure that inside the attack behavior, we stop running when we click the attack button, so that it stops like it did before. So if we open up our attack behavior one more time, if I could find it here, then we'll have to go to the on state enter and comment it in. And in here, we'll have to say player dot instance dot attack equals true. So now our player script knows that he's attacking, so that he can't move anymore. And then we say if player dot instance on ground. So if the player is attacking while he's on the ground, so when we enter this state and he's on the ground, then we say player dot instance dot my rigid body dot velocity equals vector2.0. Yes. So now if we are on the ground and attacking, we are stopping running. So this is the code we had in the player before. But at some point we are done attacking, so we need to find the onState exit function so that he can move again. If we save this right now and we go in here and we try to run and attack, you'll see that he stops running. But now he can't move anymore because I never told him that he's able to run again. You can try again, run the other side and we attack. Boom, he stops running, but I'm unable to move again. So we have to make sure that we can move at some point. So down here, there's something called onState exit. So try to comment that one in. And in onState exit, we say player dot instance dot attack. Sorry, not like that. Attack equals false. So now we can move again. And then we just reset the trigger, animator dot reset trigger attack. Just for good measure. And we say animator dot reset trigger throw. Oh, not throw, because we don't need that anymore. Let's wait with the throw actually. Let's wait until we actually add it. So right now we just reset the attack trigger. Okay, so if we play the game now, I should be able to run, then attack, and then run again. So if we run here, I attack, and then I'm able to run again, as you can see here. So now we have the same functionality as we had before we changed everything. So we can run, attack, stop, and then run again. Yes. The next behavior we'll have to add is the jump behavior, but before we do that, we'll have to create one little thing inside the player script, because I just noticed that inside the player script, in the second if statement, we are setting the velocity of the rigid body. And there is one mistake here, because down here in the end, we are using my animator.velocity.y, or at least I'm using that. Maybe you wrote it right and saw my mistake when we were writing this. But this doesn't have to be my animator, it has to be my rigid body instead of my animator. And when you have done that, you should remember to save, because now you should be able to jump correctly. If you don't fix this, then the player will not be able to jump right away when he hit the ground. And besides that, I can see I misspelled rigid body here, so I'll just rename it to my rigid body. There was missing the D after the I was missing, so it was just Reggie body. Anyway, the spelling mistake is not important, but the use of the correct component, which is the rigid body, is important, else we will not get the behavior we want. When we have fixed that, inside the handle movement, we will have to jump back into Unity, and in here we'll have to add a jump behavior to our jump attack. So go to your layers again, your air layer, select the jump attack, click add behavior, and write jump behavior. And when you have written jump behavior, you have to click create and add, and double click on it to open it up. And in here we'll have to write some functionality to be able to jump. So inside the onStateExit function, we'll have to outcomment it, and we'll have to write player.instance.jump equals false. When you've done that and you have saved it, you'll need to go to the onStateEnter and uncomment it, and click player.instance.jump equals true. So now you should be able to jump. If you would outcomment this in here and save and jump back into the game and run it now, you will be unable to jump, as you can see here. If we press space, nothing happens. You can see it goes into takeoff, but it never goes into landing, and never plays this functionality. It never shows this layer here, so we're only able to run, and it never goes around in here. But if we go back into the script and comment this one in and save and set the instance to jump to true, so we switch the layers at some point and we go up in the air from our other script, well, then you should be able to jump now with your player. So he's falling and he's landing, and now you can jump. You can see you can jump right away when you hit the ground here, as we were able to do before as well, as you can see here. So now we have the jump functionality back. The last thing we'll have to fix before we can start on implementing the throw is the slide behavior. So basically we need to go to the layers, ground layer, select the slide, and click add behavior. And here we have to add a new slide behavior and create and add. So basically we could add the same script to some of them, but I think it's easier for us to split it up in different behaviors. So that's why I'm making a behavior for each animation. When you have added the slide behavior, you will have to go to the onStateExit, outcomment this, and write player.instance the slide equals false, and player.reset trigger, or not player, sorry, animator.reset trigger slide. And then we'll have to go to the onStateEnter, so that's the function that's called when the state starts, and then we have to say player.instance.slide equals true, and then save this. And when you have done that, you should be able to run around and slide again. Is it run, slide? Yeah, slide, and you're not able to move the other direction before you're done sliding. So now we have all the functionality we had before, and we should be able to do the exact same things. I can see there's one error here. When I'm attacking in the air, you'll see that I'm able to, or it jumps automatically when I land. So we'll have to fix that little bug so it doesn't just jump when he hits the ground after attacking. The reason that we're getting this jump bug is because if we select our air layer and click on the jump attack, you'll notice that it has a jump behavior on it, and it shouldn't have that jump behavior on it because it only needs to be on the takeoff animation. So click on the jump attack, right click on the jump behavior, and remove it. When you've done that, you should be fine, and you should be able to attack and land an attack without just jumping up right away as we just did before. When you've done that, well, then we are done setting up our project and preparing for the throw attack. We can make a little order here in our asset folder because now we have some behaviors just laying around here. So you can create a new folder by right-clicking, clicking create folder, and then call this folder animation behaviors. When you've done that, you can just take all your behaviors here, select them and pull them into the animation behavior folder so that they are all in here so we know where we got them. So that's basically it for this part of the tutorial. If you haven't done it already, then please don't forget to follow me on Twitter and like my Facebook page and subscribe to this channel to stay tuned for more updates. Remember that InScope Studios is a community founded page, which means that all your support is very, very important to me. So if you're interested in supporting me, you can do it in different ways. You can either just download this current project on the link on the screen right now, or you can also support me by becoming a patron. If you become a patron, then you will get lots of different perks and you will also be able to get every single project that I ever made. Again, thank you very much for watching this video and I hope you'll continue with this series.